That was Richard Hayes, author of The Moral Vision of the New Testament, Duke Divinity School. Pretty well known, pretty regarded guy. What did that or the readings do for you? Or maybe you just want to talk about resurrection or not?
Gave you a lot to think about.
Was this a new idea that the resurrection of the body is not the same as the immortality of the soul? That's one of the things he said up front, right? Is that differentiation a little new?
It wasn't new to me.
Not new, okay.
No. But there's no doubt it's difficult to comprehend and put your hands around that whole concept. It's just.
I wonder how the only example we have of someone coming back from the death is Jesus, and he was walking alongside people. So he was in a physical form or a physical form appearance.
Yeah, it's funny. It seems to be like mostly a physical form because he can be touched and eat food.
Yes.
But he also seems to be able to like walk through a locked door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes and no.
Is that how we're going to be resurrected? I mean, that being the only example we have of resurrection.
So it's really hard, and I don't know that this book wants to do this, but it, for me, it's like, is this describing something like an impartial observer would in a scientific study? Or are these stories talking about like, don't hate me when I say this, but are they like figurative metaphor? Like, hey, resurrected bodies cannot be held back by locked doors. Is that literally true? Or is it like, hey, you can't lock this out? I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
And our human, an expression of our human desires for immortality, our human desires for our hope also represents our greatest fears, but our hopes for that not happening, that we're just nothing.
But the idea of immortality goes back a lot further, I think, in Jesus, because the Egyptians had that. The Pharaoh would walk across the river Styx, and then he would be recreated.
And that speaks to the human need. It wasn't just at that time and just that philosophy. I think as humans, we've always been afraid of and needed reassurance that we would live on.
And I don't know if this applies, but sometimes when you see your kids, or it could happen with anyone, and you'd say, when she does that, she looks just like mother, or she acts just like mother. It's like traits that, and she may, my daughters didn't know my mother, and except at very old age, but yet they sometimes do things that, mom would do that. Yeah. And that's, I don't know, where does that come from?
And when her father passed away, a few days after the funeral, he came to her when she was in bed and said to her, everything's going to be okay.
Well, I just had this dream, but it would seem so.
I think sometimes when someone has passed away, we sense their presence around us. I don't know what that means either.
Do you believe that?
What?
That sometimes when a person passes away, people feel their presence around them?
I believe some people have that experience.
I have had that experience.
Me too.
Personally.
Yeah.
And yet, there are other people who say that don't believe that would tell me that, well, that was a hallucination because come from your grief. Again, that desire to reconnect with them. But I felt it.
Yeah, I did.
I think the world's a pretty big place though, and this is what makes it kind of hard to take on a topic like this, because you asked me, do I believe that? I believe people have that experience. Have I had it? Not that I remember. Doesn't bother me. That people have experiences I don't have. And there's a lot of wacky experiences out there, right? There's a lot of wacky things that may not be for me, to me, by me, involving me. I'm
Does
okay with
the
that.
church recognize that?
Which church?
Our church.
Well, let me comfort you about the Episcopal Church. We are united in worship, not in doctrine. So do we have a statement of faith about that? No.
We don't.
Do we have a creed about it? No. We ever going to? I hope not.
Yeah.
What does our church say about angels and demons? Not much. Do I believe in it? No. Can you? Sure. We don't make that like the issue. In in our best thinking, we don't.
Is the issue in the Episcopal Church?
Well, I don't know what the issue is.
What is-
Usually what we argue is like, do you have to do it just like the prayer book says or not? Or, hey, you didn't do it the way I grew up, so it must be wrong. I mean, honestly, those are the kinds of things we mostly do. When people come, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, came from a different church background that was like telling me like, yeah, they're okay with women and they don't know what they think about gay people, but they know not to, like who are they to judge, right? Like, I would tell you, like, those are issues for some Episcopals. Those aren't issues for me. Like, I dealt with those a long time ago. But some people, those are really big issues. I've had 2 people tell me this week, like, boy, I walked in and I saw you had ink on your arms and I didn't know if I could stay. That's not my issue. That's yours.
Right. Yeah.
What's the church's issue? I don't know. I didn't know that the Episcopal Church has an issue with that. I don't like aim to push the limits just to push the limits, but like, I think pastorally, like the church might say like, don't push people just to push people. Like that's not always wise.
No.
But I don't know that the church has a stance on that because it's so like, who cares? Increasingly, like we're figuring out not to care about that stuff. I hope.
And one of our legs of our stool is reason.
Mhm.
And so my thinking is that leaves the reason to us as individuals.
Hopefully, and I think hopefully we reason it out in community. I mean, this is one thing Andy said about 2 years ago. Amber had asked him a question about Bible study, and he said, there's this really unfortunate thing that happened during the Reformation is people decided to read the Bible by themselves. And that was really sad because they only read it themselves. And so they became the arbiters by themselves of what was right and wrong for everybody else. Instead of, hey, I've read this, I'm thinking maybe we really should sacrifice our firstborn children on a mountain. Then there's other people in the room that are like, I don't think so. I think that would be a cautionary tale, but that doesn't seem like a good thing to do. So, I was talking to a guy yesterday in confession, and he said, like, hey, I justified this particular thing for years, saying this and this and this to myself. And I was like, yeah, there's probably a lot of pastoral wisdom in that. And of course, what he said is, but I was just justifying what I was doing. So we can use reason or scripture or tradition to support whatever we want. That's what I think. But when we do it together, then people can say, like, no, honey, that's self-serving what you're doing. That's not it. You've twisted reason because you want to justify what you want to do instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
So I hope that's how the church goes now. And look, sometimes collectively we get together and I'm going to tell you, we still make mistakes.
Yeah.
Just because it's a consensus doesn't mean it's right. And yet, when we live by ourselves, there's no accountability. So
That's right.
there's gotta be some constant conversation and reflection over that. But I don't know, to be honest, if there was an Episcopal position about the resurrection of the body. I don't think I'd care anyway.
There was a lot of reference in this reading about the creed, what the creed says. You know, I believe in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting.
Yeah.
And it was mentioned several times. So what do you think about that? Because we say that.
We do, if I'm really honest, I don't like the creed. I don't like it. Because I don't find it prayerful at all. I don't find it anything that is going to influence the way, frankly, I behave my life. I don't. I think it's a litmus test for orthodoxy, and okay, it's fine, but like, I don't know that that's where I want to put my heart. I mean, the one we do, for Children's Chapel, I believe in God above. I believe in Jesus' love. I believe the Spirit too comes to teach me what to do. I believe that I should be kind and loving, Lord, like thee.
That's pretty
I
good.
like that.
I find that so much more compact
Yeah.
and like ambiguous, but also like, I should be kind,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
and I'd
Yeah.
like to. The Nicene Creed, I'm not putting it down, but it doesn't have the like, and so what? The so what? You have to extrapolate that stuff out. Now, maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe what they're trying to do is say, look, we say this every week, so how could we say it in a way that encourages us to be, more faithful
And more kind.
and more kind? Because it's not explicitly there, but it would be nice, right?
Ethical and, just good people.
This is where, I don't know what the Episcopal position is. Well, I probably do, but I did get a couple people who weren't happy that I changed the greatest commandment to read the greatest commitment. They said, well, it's a command. It doesn't matter if you want to do it. I said, it exactly matters if I want to do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm a Gen Xer. Don't tell me what to do. But when I make a commitment, I'll keep it. I forget Gen Xer. I'm an American. I'm not a slave to anybody. Like, we make our own destiny. So look, I'd much rather make a commitment than be told something. Wouldn't you? I mean, wouldn't you want your children to commit to your values instead of being commanded to do them?
Yeah.
If you had a pick. Now, you might command them, but I hope you'd rather have their commitment. So that's where we find ourselves in the Episcopal Church.
Yeah.
The reason I said I don't know that I would care is because, I would care, but I don't think I'd be bound by the church's ruling. Is that wrong that I said that? I don't know.
Wow.
It's, I just see our world changing so differently because this church has always believed this.
Mm.
And now they're separating, and we've done it, the Methodists have done it. The Baptists have even had a split within. And who would have ever thought that would happen? So the Catholic Church is changing gradually. And it just gives you a lot to think about. It's not good or bad.
Well, and I do wonder if when we say what's the church's standpoint, if that doesn't in fact lead us towards splits.
Yes.
Because if you don't fit, then what are you supposed to do? Convert, leave, apologize, not speak your mind?
Well, don't you think the Episcopal Church in the last 40 years has changed?
Absolutely. And a lot of people, and I will say, like pastorally, a lot of people felt like their church left them behind when it started to stand out for social justice.
Right.
I get that. They felt left behind by their church. And I had some sorrow for that. And
But I'm so glad they did.
I'm also kind of glad that
Very
we dared to take a stand, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of other churches where you can be petty and racist. there's not a lot of churches where you can't be.
Okay. One other thing. When my aunt died 2 years ago, and she was Southern Baptist, and we had this beautiful cemetery funeral. They were giving the, I don't know what, but they got into the body and, in essence, what they said was no cremation, that the body, blah, blah, blah. And I told Scott, my older son, on the way back to Houston, you know, Scott, I don't remember ever seeing that in the Bible about the body and shouldn't be cremated or. I said, I need to think about that. And so reading this, it was brought out. And I'm like, and I remembered you saying, it doesn't matter whether you're buried or cremated. As far as the body, did I misunderstand? Dust to dust.
I mean, I think all of this is like, what we rarely recognize is how much the Bible reads us. We always think we're reading it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to tell you, the
Yeah.
culture is different, and that doesn't mean our culture is worse. It's just different.
It
But
is.
to say we need to live in the culture of the Bible for it to apply to us, I mean, I disagree. I don't think we should have slaves. I don't think women should be purchased from their fathers. I don't want to do
Well,
that.
it's changed over the centuries.
And some of it's good and some of it's bad and some of
Right.
it's just different, right? And so, you know, the whole thing about cremation, I mean, I guess you know, you're gonna get your body back. Well, I mean, look, I just don't understand if God can miraculously do a thing with bones that have turned to dust.
Whether you're in the casket or you've been cremated.
What? A miracle is
Whether
just a
you
darn
just-
miracle. There's not levels of miracles, are there? Oh, you know, God was gonna reconstitute your naturally decomposed ashes, but because you went and got burned in a furnace, God can't do that. That's just nuts, don't you? I mean, that's so unreasonable,
I think
particularly when you think about the other parts of the story. I mean, scripture and tradition, I don't know what to say about them, but you know, again, my understanding of scripture is whatever challenge you put before God, God can jump over the bar. I mean, we don't do it on purpose, but God can jump pretty high, right? So, you know, the reason people are cremated has to do with like economics and environmentalism, and those seem really good things to me.
I didn't know too.
My grandfather wanted to be cremated because of environmentalism.
Mhm.
And that was way long ago.
Way
And
before this
Yeah, he
time.
said he just didn't like land being used just for graveyards.
And I don't have anything against people wanting a body burial.
Oh, I don't.
I just don't want it.
Yeah, that's what he said.
I
And
don't
if you
care
want to
either.
spend $10,000 on a casket,
Oh.
you got the money, that's what you want to do. I'd rather it not do that. That's just me though,
Yeah.
but it doesn't, and this is, I think, part of the problem, whether we're talking about resurrection or judgment or worship. Sometimes we think there is a right and wrong
Mhm.
instead of that may not be right for me. I know that sounds real relative and progressive. I just think probably most things are that way.
And so much of that, I think, has changed. I don't know about the rest of you women and men. But growing up as a Hispanics in South Texas, it was traditional for the families at certain times that they just determined. It was my grandfather's birthday or, I'm just making this up, we didn't do this, but so they go and take flowers and say prayers or they dedicated a mass,
Yeah.
a Catholic mass, who dedicated a mass to him in his memory or to
Right.
her. And frankly, I all that because I lived it, I guess. It was very sweet
And comforting.
and comforting. Yes, it's sweet and comforting and kind. family like.
And then every year they have the Day of the Dead where they go to,
Mhm.
where they go to graveyards and, have tequila or something. I don't know.
It's a good
And
tradition.
that's everybody who has family is buried at that particular little cemetery.
Yeah.
They all say hello and have
But-
their,
But the cremated remains could be there too.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with more of an association with a place and presence than it does with a body and a place and a presence. But that's just me, right? And I would say there's been a huge cultural shift the last 40 years. It used to be everybody had a wake.
Yeah,
Well, I don't want to wake, and I'll tell you as a priest, I won't do an open casket funeral. I refuse to do it. So you can have your preferences, but I won't honor that one because I don't think it's right. I think it's distracting. We're not there to look at the memory of a person. We're there to hand them over to God. So if you want to have a wake, that's okay, but not in the service. Those are different to me. I won't do military honors in a service either, because I don't believe in the fusion of church and state. I think military honors happen outside of the church. I respect
you
them.
said that.
I absolutely respect them. They don't belong in a sanctuary. I don't think so. It's supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations, not just for ours. And I could be wrong.
There's something he said that is kind of interesting. He said that there was a continuity with Israel.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I quite understand what that means, because I have no continuity with what Israel is like right now. So,
Yeah, my only guess is that in the Hebrew tradition, and this is still true, if you die in a hospital and you're Jewish, you really shouldn't go to the morgue. This is against Jewish sensibilities. The Jewish undertaker should come get you right out of your room without you going into the place where other dead bodies are. And your physical burial will be within the day. So burials happen real quick still in the Jewish tradition. And I wonder if that is part of it, is that there is this emphasis on the quick bodily burial. That's all I can reason from that.
Mike, what about? My brother was a mortician, and years ago, we were part owners at a funeral home. And so I learned a lot about a lot of different things. But you're talking now with the Jewish, and I had a friend that we were close, and she was Jewish. And I knew they believe you have to bury within 24 hours, isn't it?
Yeah.
But in most states, there is a state law about embalming. So do the Jewish people embalm? I never thought about that.
I think so, but I'm actually not sure about that. I think so.
Boy, you get it done in one day.
Yeah, there's no wasting time. I mean, seriously,
I know.
when
They,
a Jewish patient died at the hospital, I mean, if they were there 2 hours, I'd have been surprised. I mean, they were off to the
really wanna
races.
bury before sunset.
That's correct.
don't they?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
so they take him directly to the cemetery?
No, they just
Yeah.
take them to like
No,
Home,
the funeral parlor or
Oh.
something, whatever it is they do.
and then the passage.
But I didn't think there's, look, if you bury a body the same day, you don't need all of that stuff either.
Right.
Right? It's just because we wait that you put it in a fridge and all of that stuff.
right.
we had some Arab friends, and the father passed away, and his son had to go to clean the body,
Yeah.
and it was buried within 24 hours, so.
Yeah. I mean, but consider that cremation's not like a new idea. It's been happening in India for a long time, right?
I think we have increased cremation in this nation because, like you said, environmental, I think has had a lot to do with it.
And the economics.
And the economic. Now, look at today, what it costs you to cremate a body versus 10 years ago. And they got the word too, and now it's gone up and up.
$1,500 is my last. point of reference.
It depends on where you are.
Yeah,
and
but a
who you
funeral
go
is gonna be at least 5.
Oh, funerals
That's with
are
the
outside.
cheapest coffin you can
Yeah,
get,
first.
right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I appreciate this, talking about like the diversity here. And I don't know if you're interested to hear the history of the concept of resurrection.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't quite worked out when the scriptures were written. It seems like it comes around in the Jewish tradition sometime around the year 165
Okay.
BCE. That's because there were these people, there was this order by the Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes that if you had any of the Torah, it would be burned alongside you. If a child was circumcised, the baby would be killed and the mother would have to wear it around her neck for a day before she was killed. So this was kind of like forced Hellenization. And some people essentially said no, and they started this war with the War of Independence from, you know, what was left over of the Greek Empire. And some of those people died prematurely in the sense that they were like 18 or 21 or 15. And it seems like this notion of resurrection comes back, that those people get their life back, but they will die again. So if you died unjustly, you get to live the rest of your life, but you'll die again. I don't know if that makes sense. The resurrection seems more like Lazarus style than it does Jesus style. Now, Jesus dies prematurely. He didn't die of natural causes. He gets his life back. He eats. He touches stuff. But then later he ascends to heaven. So that's like a different thing, right? That's
Got it.
different. So when Paul talks about the resurrection of the dead, it's hard to know. I think we've moved on mentally to like, oh, you come back from the dead and you go to heaven and you're alive forever. And maybe this means heaven is like somehow physical, like there's some physicality to it. I just think we've so moved on from that idea about you die early, you get your life back because you were cheated out of your life, so you get to have the rest of it. That seems to be what was going around in biblical days. To be fair, when you read a Hebrew Bible, there's none of that. When you die, you go to the place of the dead and it's real dark. That's just where you go. There's no like heaven or comfort. It's just the place of the dead. Like maybe people are kind of sleeping under the ground. It's hard to know. One person gets brought back from the dead in the Hebrew Bible. It's the prophet Samuel, and it's a witch that does it. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, I don't belong here. Like he didn't want it. He wanted to like stay in the place of the dead because that's just where you go, right? So there's no hell in the Hebrew Bible. There isn't. There's the place where dead people go. And Job even says, if you're a baby or a king, or you're a sinner or a saint, you all go down to the grave. The pit, Abaddon, Sheol, they all mean the same thing. When they meet Greek people, then there's Hades, place of the dead. But then there's also that Greek place Tartarus, which is like the place of ironic punishments. Like Sisyphus has to push this boulder up a hill, and then it rolls back down, and he has to push it back up. And that's what he does for eternity, apparently. So that's like ironic punishment, Tartarus, but that's not Hades. And then at some point, there's no more Hades. There's just like Tartarus and Olympus. So you either live with the gods or you live in like with the damned. And then that kind of came into Christianity. But it still hasn't come into Judaism. I mean, our rabbi told us, like, of course we don't believe in hell. Why would God punish you forever for something you did that doesn't last forever? So some of our Jewish brothers and sisters don't believe in any afterlife. Some believe that, hey, if you're a bad person, you just don't get one. Good people do. So I don't know that there's any like constancy. It seems like it's a moving
moving.
target, right? Notice that Jesus actually doesn't do any miracles after he's resurrected, other than walking through locked doors, although that may or may not even be literal. He doesn't heal people. He doesn't bring people back from the dead. He eats fish. He talks to people.
And he goes.
And he goes. That's about all he does, right? So it's not like he's resurrected like Shazam with superpowers. He just isn't dead anymore. I don't know what to do with the physicality of it. I think the book is pushing. I think what the book really wants us to say is your soul is not separate from your body. Like your soul includes your body. This is like a pretty basic point that's very biblical that we've moved past. Oh, the body doesn't matter. Well, it does. Because you wouldn't be you without a body.
Right.
There was a lot of emphasis too in the reading about taking care of your body, that
Yes,
you should
yes.
take care of it, you know.
Which we don't do. Culturally, we don't do it. Individually, you can't do something individually that culturally isn't being done. You can do better, but you can't. So you do your best, but look, we live in a time of like terrible health, right? I mean, sure, people don't smoke anymore, but you know, in this neighborhood, we're 4 miles away from a grocery store, but you can get the $1 Wendy's menu. It's economic.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is how we live, right? I don't know. What I think about when I hear the stories though are less like what happens when I die. I'm not one of those people, and maybe I'm in denial. I don't need to live forever. I actually be okay to just sleep for a really long time. I could use some rest. So when I hear the story, I think less about what's next. I hear this story of resurrection as like, oh, there can be life after catastrophically being wounded, whether that's physical, emotional, or spiritual. Like there still can be life. And as you'll hear me say Sunday, I'm already spoiling this, like that's, and I say it every year when we hear this story, like that's my understanding of Thomas, is that these places that like, in which death and pain enter the body, well, they're surrounded with life. Like that's the message of the resurrection, is that like those wounds don't, yeah, I mean, they hurt and they're painful, and naturally they would kill you, but they're like totally surrounded by life. If we can get there. And if we can't, I think God understands and will take care of that for us later. But I hear it as an invitation to live now, you know, and I don't think it's the triumph of the human spirit. I don't. I think in some ways there is something miraculous about, as I mentioned, my friend Ed Martin, who was tortured at the Hanoi Hilton, coming back and being a 3-star admiral. I think that's a resurrection story.
Yeah.
Or John McCain being waterboarded and then coming out and saying, I am dead against being waterboarding. I find it to be a resurrection story. Did God do it to him? No, it was terrible. Would it justifiably cause anyone to lose their mind? Probably.
Yeah.
And then somehow he didn't.
And the stories just of individual people. I think of women that were abused and go to counseling or whatever it is they choose to do, and they live their lives later just normal. I say normal, you know, just the regular life without ever getting in those relationships again or ever being involved in that kind of hurt. People do amazing things. That's when we're alive.
They do, and you know, honestly, I think we don't do it in spite of being wounded. We do it from those positions of woundedness, right? And what I think the story does that's really cool is the resurrected Jesus' wounds don't go away. They're always there.
That's right. Yeah.
And ours don't either. And it got me thinking this week, you know, when we talk about bodily resurrection, maybe this is really weird. Let's pretend you're born without 3 fingers on your hand.
Okay.
So you live your life. At the resurrection, do you have 5 fingers or do you just have 2?
I don't know.
I know the conventional answer. The conventional answer is you get a perfect body, you get all five.
He's still
What
out.
was wrong with having two? How is that deficient?
We don't know whether you get 2 or 5.
I hope you keep your two.
Yeah.
I hope you don't get more than you ever had. I hope at resurrection you realize the body you had was just fine.
Yeah, did okay.
Because I think if we tell the other story, then you are disabled. Instead of you have 2 fingers instead of 5.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stake in this.
You can heal mentally if you can't heal physically. Like, you're okay if you only have 2. You learn to deal with it.
If you've got major depressive disorder at the resurrection, do you still have it?
No,
I think you better,
because that's you.
because that's who
think
you
what?
are.
That's it.
And there's something wrong with having major depressive disorder? It ain't wrong. It's got its own struggles, I can tell you.
It is what it is.
I've really been thinking about this week. My friend Rob cut off the ends of 2 fingers when he was in high school. Is he disabled?
No.
Is there something wrong with his body because he doesn't have the 2 fingertips on his hand? Well, life would be so much easier if he had them. Well, only because we expected it would be.
He's challenged, but he's not.
I've never heard him complain about it.
To learn, he had to learn to do with it.
I just have to share this, and this needs to stay here. Okay.
Okay.
My husband Richard has a deformed right hand, and I'm sure you've noticed that. It has caused him lots of problems over the years. Teachers tried to make him right with that hand, which wouldn't work. He was tormented by peers because he was different. He has used that to propel himself. He has overcome that by excelling in other areas, math, intelligence, all kinds of ways. So he has turned that into something that created good out of the pain. However, he is still, you would never know it, but he is still hurt by that. When we started going to church together, the church we went to, people shook hands a lot. And he has had the experience of shaking hands with the right hand, and the person grabbed his hand and screamed. Because he was so horrified. So Richard shakes hands, I don't know if you notice it, with his left hand. Or he turns it around. I don't know exactly how he does it, but even within the last 10 years, he's had to accommodate that. I came home from the foot washing the other day, and we talked about how beautiful it was. I mean, I was really touched by the foot washing. And he wanted to come next year. I had told him, and I said, great, let's go together next year. And I said, we washed hands, and that might be more comfortable for you than washing feet. And he said, and then I had told him how you washed my hands were washed, and then I washed someone else. And he said, I couldn't let anybody wash my hands. And I said, could I wash your hands? And he said, yes, you could wash my hands. Oh. And this is connected. I promise it's connected to the resurrection of the body.
Yeah.
I agree that what is perfection, and that is him. that is who he is, and perhaps that's who he will be. But I would wish for him to have a perfect hand, so he doesn't have to have those feelings anymore. So I'm conflicted intellectually and emotionally, what I want to happen. It doesn't matter what I want. What matters is what is, but there's a confliction there for me.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me share that with you.
Really
I've been
grateful.
carrying that
Thank
all
you.
week.
Really grateful.
Yeah.
Well, see, when we think about that, I hadn't thought about, what about the blind?
And the
Of
alcohol.
course,
and the
the
alcohol.
blind would want to
To
see.
see, yeah.
He would like his hand to be.
But do blind people want to see because they've been told
They want to.
that
Okay,
they're not whole human beings?
now let me rephrase that.
It's not an either or. I'm sure it's always a both and. I'm sure it's always a both and. But if I think blind people construct images of the world just like we do. They use different senses than we do. And you know what? They might see things differently than we do.
I wasn't really thinking, I was thinking about blind people, but more in my thought is, I have a grandfather that died of blind. He had blindness when he died, but he lost his eyesight before he died. I had a great grandfather that also, I've had glaucoma for 40 years. I'm blessed that we have the doctors and the meds now, but for many years, I was afraid that I would be blind before I died. It still could happen, but it doesn't look like it. But if I did lose my eyesight after having it all my life, I would hope after I died and was resurrected, if I was, that I had my sight.
And my thinking about that is that even if you haven't had your sight ever from birth, I mean, the colors
What you
are
meant,
so
Yeah.
beautiful. And I would want that person to have that
me
beauty
too,
and that experience.
me too.
Or, perhaps when we're resurrected, we get what we want.
Huh.
I like that.
Thank you, Tim.
It's such a tough story because I don't think there's always an either or, but I do think one of the things that this whole topic hopefully helps us to consider is how do we treat people whose bodies are not normal? And do we say one day you'll get a better one, or are we able to say your body's fine like it is?
You're doing well with it.
I don't even know what it's like, but it's fine. Like I am not, I don't need you to get cosmetic surgery for your cleft lip because I'm afraid to look at you. I need to deal with that myself. There's nothing wrong with having a cleft palate. There's nothing wrong. It makes swallowing harder. So we have a really cheap, easy surgery we can do to make swallowing easier. It leaves a scar. Will that scar go away at the resurrection? I mean, I'm not trying to antagonize you. I mean, I think these are really important questions,
Yeah.
actually. Of course, we would lament losing our sight and we would do everything we could to keep it, right?
Absolutely.
But would our life be over if we lost our vision? It could be. I'd like to hope it wouldn't.
It would be if you let it be.
Well, and I think sometimes we think we're stronger than we are, but in that sense, but I do wonder if, and I actually wrote a blog about this, which is probably really crazy, about those pigs and the demons, right? And the unclean spirits, whatever those are, right, when I go into the pigs, and the pigs immediately run off the cliff. It doesn't say the unclean spirits made them run off the cliff.
Right.
I read that story this year and I thought, I say really dumb stuff like that all the time. Like if I'd rather die than have fill in the blank, schizophrenia, ALS, Alzheimer's. If I get a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, I'm going to Oregon. I'm not going to MD Anderson. Maybe I'm one of the pigs. because I'm too afraid to live life on its own terms. I often am pretty afraid to live life on its own terms, but that brings me back to the body, right? So is it that your body's deficient, or social judgment has made you feel deficient in your own body? And look, it could be both, but I know the only one we can work on is the second one.
Yeah.
And if this is the thing, if I've got like a I don't know, whatever it is, a goiter on my neck, and at the resurrection I get a perfect body, hell, then there was something wrong with me for having a goiter on my neck, and I can't go there. That seems wrong. Do you know what I mean? When we talk about like perfection and how we're not there, who is?
But you know, if you talk about Clear or the Cliff Palace, will we have the same emotions in the resurrected body? And so when you're looking at things that we have now, that
I don't know. I mean, when Mary grabs Jesus, he says, "Don't touch me." He's not like, "Have a flower. I've got some cake," you know, like, "Cling to me as much as you want. Let me go." I don't know. There's no stage direction, so I don't know his tone when he said it, but I imagine it was firm. Let me go. This is a mystery, but I think this side of the mystery, the question that the book wants us to ask is, how do we treat our bodies? How do we treat other bodies? How do we imagine perfection to be? I think that's really, really important, because if we have a notion of perfection and we look in the mirror and we don't see it, we will feel like we're diminished human beings. Who doesn't do that? Who doesn't do that?
We're always critical of ourselves.
Yeah, and when I asked you, well, what body do you want in heaven? Not the one you have. Do you? Do you want this one? Or do you want the one when you were like 15? Or do you want Brad Pitt when he was 21? I mean, like, you know, like, what body do you want?
And at the end of the day, nobody is perfect.
Especially not Jesus, because he's got hideous wounds on his resurrected body.
He does.
So why would we think that we get a perfect one?
That's how he proved that he had come back, by
By
people
the word.
seeing the wounds.
And I think that's also, I don't know, I said this on Monday, Thursday, like, probably crazy, but you know, like during the Passover, you're supposed to sacrifice an unblemished animal. It has to be perfect. And I wonder if we aren't in fact invited to sacrifice what we think is perfect so we can live the lives we have. Take the unblemished idea and put it on the altar so God can have it, and then you can live who you are, which is not that.
Wow.
I think that'll preach, actually.
Well, preach it.
But I think that comes back to this, right? I really think it comes back. Now, look, if I see somebody who with macular degeneration, I'm not going to say, it's all fine. It's all fine. Don't see a doctor. But I do think there's something important to say. Wherever this goes, you're not less of a human being. You will probably feel like it. You're not. God's not getting even with you over something you did when you were 7. That is not how this works. God's not rejecting you. You're going to feel diminished in your humanity. And the good news is you don't have to stay there. Easy for me to say, my vision works. I had a lot of like, I mean, I'm really young and stuff, but when I found that I had more plaque in my heart than 80% of men my age, that's a really weird statistic. 80% of men my age are like doing nothing. I like ran a marathon. Like, what do you mean? How can I have that? I mean, it was initially I had this little despair reaction, you know.
Which is normal.
And do I take reasonably good care? Could I take better care of myself? I'm sure I could. We all could. Am I going to? Probably not. I mean, I take reasonably good care of myself, right? I run, I eat well, I walk the dog, like I do those kinds of things. So I don't need to feel guilty that I have genetics that predispose me
Like
to
it's
having.
genes, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what am I gonna get? A perfect genome when I die? No.
Oh, no.
If I'm really honest, I think most of this is about how we live now, not even about what
Yeah.
happens later. Do we believe in a physical afterlife? I don't even know. I don't care, if I'm honest. But I think what we're being told is our bodies do matter. Our bodies matter. And there's something really beautiful about scars that are no longer bleeding.
Yeah.
Wounds that are bound up, they don't go away, but they're not bleeding. That sounds like healing to me.
Yeah.
And I would much rather have smile lines in my face because I enjoyed my life than no lines in my face when I'm 80.
That's right.
I don't know why we don't say stuff like that though. You know, like yeah,
You earn these.
they're earned.
We do
I think
learn,
that's
don't
right. But instead of celebrating that, we say like time for Botox.
No.
But like, this is like the best sign that you've cared for other people. Right? I mean, these, those are signs you were there.
Or you had a lot of fun.
Or even you just had a lot of worry because you love somebody.
Yeah.
Well, you want to take that, you want to take that away? Okay. I'm not gonna solve this, but I'm grateful to talk about it. Now,
Yeah.
next week, I can't be here on Wednesday, so could we do this Tuesday? Or do we want to just skip?
Could y'all do Tuesday?
Tuesday works for
Tuesday's
me.
okay for me. Tuesday's good for us, right?
Well,
I do